you very much, everyone, and welcome to the meeting. We're starting just a few minutes late. This is, of course, the Western Gateway's national transport body, and we have members from most of the local authorities here. Christian, have you received some apologies that you'd like to read out?
Yes, we received two apologies from Councillor Warren and Councillor Hogg.
And if you could just say local authorities, please.
Councillor Warren from North Somerset and Councillor Hogg from North Somerset.
Okay, thank you very much. What we'll do just first of all is just for board members only, if that's all right, just to introduce ourselves for everyone who participates, and then as we go through the meeting, when somebody speaks for the first time, if they could identify themselves, that would be great. So shall we start online? Alan, I can't see all the participants there, but I can see Councillor Bryan, Councillor Alexander and Councillor Pearce. Shall we start with you, Ray?
Yeah, fine. I'm Councillor Ray Bryan, portfolio holder for Highways, Travel and Environment for Dorset Council.
Thank you. Don?
Afternoon, Don Alexander, Cabinet Member for Transport in Bristol.
Thanks. Steve Pearce.
Hi, thank you, Mike. Councillor Steve Pearce. I'm here on behalf of Mayor Dan Norris from West of England Combined Authority.
Thank you. Caroline?
Hi, Caroline Thomas, Cabinet Member for Highways, Transport, Street Scene and Flooding for Woolwich Council.
Thank you. Simon, I know you're not a board representative and you're here as a guest to support Ray, but maybe you could introduce yourself as well?
Yeah, of course, Mike. Simon Gibson, lead member for Highways at Dorset Council.
Thank you. Have I missed out any other board members who are here? I think we are, I think not at the moment. So thanks, that was online. David?
I'm David Gray, I'm the Cabinet Member for Environment and Planning at Gloucestershire County Council, and I'm the Vice Chair of the board.
Steve?
Councillor Steve Reid, Cabinet Member for Regeneration, Environment and Strategic Infrastructure at South Gloucestershire Council.
And I'm Mark Green, Cabinet Member for Finance, Net Zero and Transport at BCP Council and Chairman of this board. So if others please could just introduce themselves the first time they speak, then that would be great. So moving on, we have the minutes on actions of the previous meeting. And if members would like to indicate if they have anything that they wish to bring up within that, the only other thing that I would like to ask, once we've done so, is that if we could please get an update on the recruitment situation that came from the last meeting, and also just to note that alternative fuels are going to be, which there was an action for, are going to be brought up in item 5 on this agenda, so we don't need to speak about that now. Are there any other items you'd like to bring up before Guido updates us on recruitment? No? Guido?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, introduce yourself as you speak.
Yes, Guido Maloney, Programme Manager at Western Gateway. So on resourcing, we were recruiting for 3 positions. First one, Transport Officer, that has been recruited for. We've selected a candidate who's accepted the offer and is joining us in April. For the Senior Transport Officer role, the job advert for that one has gone out last week. And finally, for the Lead Officer role, the job advert has not yet gone out, but will go out promptly, possibly in the next week or 2.
Okay, thank you very much. As you know, we are very keen that the lead officer role should be filled as soon as possible, so that we're able to compete more substantially on the national stage and have that voice out in front of us. So thank you very much for that. Item 3 is public participation. I understand that we don't have any public issues. Thank you, Christian. Again, you'd just like to identify yourself.
Oh, sorry.
Sure.
Christian Pitts, Project Admin Support for Western Gateway.
Thank you very much. Can people online hear people at the other end of the table okay?
Not too well, actually. Be helpful to talk up a little bit if possible.
Right, okay, so yeah, you do that as we go through. If anybody would like to speak more substantially, maybe they'd like to come up towards the microphone camera that's here, that would be great. Item 4 then is the update from our associate members, and we are, as ever, extremely grateful to our associate members from DFT, from Network Rail, and from National Highways, who have always shown such substantial support for us as an STB. So if I could ask for those updates now, we have received your written ones, and for which we are grateful. But if you would like to add to those, that would be great. Can I start with David Linus, if he's on?
I am indeed. Thank you, Chair. 12 minutes in, we're on agenda item 4 already, so whizzing through, it's good to see. I did circulate a paper, as normal. It was very last minute, just to make sure that it was absolutely as up to date as possible. It's a short paper, it's a short update this for this meeting, and I've ensured that I haven't been treading on the toes of my colleagues in National Highways or Network Rail, so I haven't included anything on rail or on strategic roads in the update. But just to quickly canter through it, bus, there's a couple of key announcements on bus, which you no doubt would have all been aware of on the 17th of February. So this was the extension of the bus recovery grant now until the end of June 2023. I'm sure that was welcome news to you all. Apologies if it was last minute again. It's just the nature of the beast and the complex negotiations which are required in order to find the money in order to actually extend the grant. Also on bus, we also announced the extension of the £2 bus fare cap. So as I said, both of those will now run until the end of June 2023, and colleagues of mine should have already been in contact with local authorities and operators in regards to how all that is going to work. If we move on to active travel, walking and cycling, the much awaited announcement on the 6th of February of a £200 million capital active travel fund round 4 scheme was announced. We gave you so much time. We gave you 18 days to get your applications in. Well, actually, Travel England did, and so that we can get the money out the door before the end of the financial year. The submitted applications was the deadline was the 24th of February. Lots of applications received. These are busily being assessed by Active Travel England, and these are for schemes which can get essentially be committed for construction by the end of the 31st of March 2024. An announcement on successful schemes on that is likely to happen. I put summer here to give some wiggle room, but I know Active Travel England are hoping that the announcements can be released in the spring. Also in regards to Active Travel Fund and the Capability Access Fund, but this is the revenue funding. There was a £32.9 million announced on that. That was announced on the 2nd of January. So that's a bit historic, but it is since the last Western Gateway Board meeting nonetheless. If we move on to local transport plan guidance, we still await it, but it's now expected to be released in March. So this is the consultation on revised local transport plan guidance, and also alongside the quantifiable carbon reductions guidance. So we're very much anticipating that will now be released in March. So that will be a consultation essentially on draft guidance. So please look out for that, and please respond to the consultation. And finally, Levelling Up Fund, that's going back a good month and a bit now. Not led by the Department for Transport, but there's an announcement on the 18th of February nonetheless of 2.1 billion allocated through round 2 of the Levelling Up Fund. More than 100 projects, 9 schemes across the southwest, totaling over 186 million pounds. Big news, important news on that as well. There remains another £1 billion in that fund, which is unallocated for a third round. We don't know exactly how that round is going to work yet, but further details will be announced in due course. So that's my written update for today, and I've just counted through that. Just something else to be aware of, it is Midlands Connect STB annual conference today. I've been in Birmingham today, and very interesting to hear the Minister speak about his commitment for STBs moving forward, demonstrated of course by our 3-year funding profile for STB. So it was good to hear the Minister talk like that in front of a fellow STB. And I'm sure the transcript of his speech will be on the internet in due course. I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, David, and once again, thank you for being our paymasters in this activity. I'm delighted to hear that the Minister was speaking about the future for STBs, and hopefully when we become big enough to have our own conference, then the Ministers will be attending it as well. I have a couple of questions, if I may. The first one, it may also to fellow board members, which is about the £2 bus fare cap. I just, maybe it's me, but I haven't seen it as being as plugged as I would have hoped it would be. This is a fantastic experiment to see whether, as we would hope, that reducing bus fares and capping bus fares could lead to a significant, potentially long-term shift to the mode of travel. And I just wondered, David, how that has been advertised around the country, and whether there is guidance that might come from the DfT to how we can maximise the next 4 months of it.
Okay, so that's not something I've picked up. Obviously, the original advertisement communication plans on that was just was around Christmas time, wasn't it? Just before it came in on the 1st of January. I know there was quite a big bang at that point. I'm not familiar with exactly what comms has been undertaken since then, and as a result of the extension of it, other than obviously I've seen the stuff on the DfT's website and normal press releases. I will take it away to the leads though to find out exactly what's being done, but certainly also very interested to hear of the views of other board members here today on what their views on that are.
Thank you. Ray, is it on the bus point that you're raising? Otherwise, I'll yeah, okay. Yeah. And then I will ask other members as well whether they've had reaction to £2 bus fare, etc. Cap. Ray.
Yeah. I know it's not David's fault. Let me just say that from the start. Still want to stay on the right side of you, David. But I'm sure BCP and other councils are absolutely being slaughtered at the moment by the BBC, looking for a story on this with the reduced passenger numbers. And had this announcement come out a bit earlier, we may have been able to deal with this a little bit better. But I think we've got to be very cautious about how we answer the media, because the media do have a habit of sort of perhaps not saying it as it probably is. I've got to be careful because they're probably online somewhere. But I do think that timing is absolutely essential, and we could have done with a strong comms message to go out with the announcement, David.
Yeah.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you. Any other board members want to talk about the £2 cap? Steve?
Yeah, thank you, David. Firstly, thank you. The extension is well worth it. But in the South Gloucestershire area and across the whole of the Weka area, of course, we've got the introduction of DRT coming along, and we still don't have through ticketing yet. It means that we'll still be paying multiple fares. I know that's not your problem, David, but it is something to bear in mind.
Thank you. David?
Yeah, I've seen and had feedback on the £2 fare. I know a few people that have taken advantage of it and used the bus. So people are aware of it. The our operator, Stagecoach, has been promoting it on the sides of the backs of the buses. So people are aware, and the extension is to be welcomed, because I do think there's also an element of, if it's Is it available or isn't it available? So the extension, I think, will encourage more people to give it a go, which would be very positive. Obviously, the proof will be in the pudding, because we have had problems with our operator in Gloucestershire. We've lost some routes, and that has been based on operating difficulties around the availability of drivers as a big part of it, but then purely commercial decisions based on the lack of footfall, if that's all, bumfall on the actual buses. So if the scheme is successful in encouraging people either to try the bus or get back on the bus, then that's a wonderful thing. So I'm hopeful that it will have that positive effect.
So I think we are all very positive and grateful for it. So my concern is that it's not being maximised, and I feel it has got a real chance on that. David.
Yes, I guess that when you're talking about communications and publicity as well, you know, obviously the department and central government has its role to play in that. Operators, as our colleague from Gloucestershire said, are absolutely key. They run the buses. They can plaster it all over their buses. But I guess local authorities have also got a part to play in also communicating it within their own regions as well. I guess you guys are the possibly the best people to know what's best in regards to communications and what works best in your particular areas. So no doubt some local authorities, at least some local authorities, are also doing their communication campaigns around this as well.
Thank you. I just want a little bit of feedback, if I may, David. I think that it may have helped, or may still have the opportunity to, if more guidance was given to the local authorities. It could even come via the STBs as far as the comms are concerned, because once again we're looking at something that works in one part of the country may well work in another part of the country, and to be able to take that best practice would be very useful.
Okay, thank you for that, Chair. I will take that away. Of course, we've got it until the end of June, so I don't think it's too late to you know, sort of ramp up any comms campaign should we wish to do so. So I'll take that away with the policy leads and come back to you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. And I have one further question, if I may, while we've got you on. We understand that there will be a promotion, or the idea that's come through DFT is that STBs should be involved in forming, for the moment we'll use the DFT words, the Centres of Excellence, which is something that probably we have spoken of in the past about the potential for ourselves to assist the local authorities. I just wonder whether you're able to give us a little bit more guidance on the function that you would see that operating, because we've just had informal chats amongst ourselves, and we're sort of seeing things a little bit, potentially a little bit differently as to the way that it would function best. Okay, so
I can get back to you on that, but my understanding is the Centres of Excellence is very much for the STBs to be a centre of excellence for the local authorities. I know there was some confusion amongst some STBs when they're talking about Centres of Excellence, and that being the centre of excellence for the group of STBs rather than their constituent local authorities. So it's very much the centre of excellence for the local authorities. Now, exactly what that covers in each STB, I guess it's dependent on where the STB is in its own journey. There's absolutely key things. It could be carbon, it could be electric vehicle infrastructure, it could be, you know, and a range of other stuff. It's certainly for Western Gateway because very much the lead, I would say, in regards to the coats and the study you're doing on coats, and also strategic cycling studies. So all of that and the work that the Western Gateway STB are doing, you could very much get yourself as, you know, to very much be that centre of excellence for local authorities to come to the STB to help them to implement the policy more locally.
Thank you. So, but it would be for our own local authorities. And would you see it that the resource should potentially be used for providing specialist technical skills, which would then be available as a resource for the constituent local authorities, or would it potentially be for helping local authorities within the area formulate bids and formulate schemes which are more likely to gain success? Or could it be both of those?
Yeah, I think it could actually be both, Chair. Absolutely, and there is a possibility, as was outlined in the business plan guidance which the DFT released and in subsequent correspondence, that there's no guarantee, but there may actually be additional money available for STBs to undertake this centre of excellence work. So it's very much, we're very keen for STBs to do this. We see STBs to have an absolutely crucial role at the subnational scale, and we really do hope that STBs across England take up this opportunity.
Thank you. I don't know whether you've had a chance to look through the papers, David, but you'll see actually when it comes to our proposed business case, we are intending to put our own money into that particularly. So hopefully supplemented by some money from DFT, but whatever that case, we would be able to pump on that in any case.
Absolutely, and I have read the business case. I've worked with your officers on that business case, and the business case looks to me to be very good. It's very it's taken on board the guidance which the DFT released on the business case. So all good in regards to that. But I guess that's a future agenda item.
Thank you very much, Steve. Okay, thank you, David, for all you've done.
David, if I may, a couple of other points. Junction M4, M5 junction, which is in the paper. I haven't seen much in the local media. Can I suggest that you might want to do a bit of a publicity campaign around that piece of work?
Yes, not my area of expertise, but I will pass it on to. Well, we got National Highways on next. I'm sure they'll be able to give us chapter and verse on what they're doing in regards to that.
All right, maybe I'll leave it until then, David.
Did you have something else to talk to? Was that also is that the stage? Okay. Thank you very much again. Thank you, David. Matt Hayward from Network Rail. Again, thank you for your written report. But if you would like to talk to us, we would be most grateful.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so I'm Matt Hayward. I'm the Head of Strategic Planning for Western Route for Network Rail. And you will know the Western Route, which is formerly from London Paddington out to the southwest. We are the kind of lead route within Network Rail for Western Gateway as well. So I'll be talking on behalf of my colleagues in our Wessex route also. You may have seen the written note. What I'll do is I'll just sort of précis that really and try and get through as briefly as I can and leave the opportunity for any specific questions. But it's starting from a position of where we are now. What is significant, I think, is that we have reached what we are starting to regard now as kind of a recovery from COVID. So from this point forward, we're looking at instead of kind of people returning who once travelled by rail, it's about sort of new growth for the railway from this point forward, which is helpful from a point of view of making plans and appraising those plans. We're up to around about 85% on both demand, so passengers on trains, and revenue from pre-COVID. Which is in line with a lot of the kind of forecast for the recovery. And now we're very much sort of looking forward about how to make the industry more efficient and how to continue to attract more new passengers to the railway. Of course, that's not necessarily helped by the recent period of industry action, which is still ongoing. And you may well have heard that there are further period of strikes in next month. So the 16th of March is the next one. And that dispute is ongoing and clearly has impacts on both the attractiveness of the network and also the efficiency as well and financial performance. So we are not out of the woods yet, but in terms of our strategic work and our planning about future improvements, there's quite a lot to be excited about. And much of that is work that we have jointly undertaken between Network Rail and Western Gateway. So in just 3 months' time, in May, we'll see significant improvements to passenger services, particularly focused around the wider sort of Bristol area and the western side of the Western Gateway area, where we'll see the culmination of the Metro West programme of investment. We'll have additional services down through Wiltshire from Bristol and up into Gloucestershire as well, to Gloucester itself. So really important step changes that will start to move the needle in terms of use of rail, hopefully within the Gateway, and some further restorations of longer distance services that we were used to seeing before COVID. So some cross-country services as well. So in the very short term, some improvements that we'll see the benefits of. And then looking slightly further down the line, we are obviously supporting Wiltshire Council with the Devizes Gateway New Station piece of work, building on the SOBC, the Strategic Outline Business Case that was submitted to the Restoring Your Railway Fund. We're going to finish that work next month. It's been quite an exciting piece of work, and is one of the many factors coming together in a piece of work we'd like to undertake jointly, looking more strategically at Wiltshire, which is often kind of unloved in terms of rail improvements, but I think has got a really critical role both within the wider national network, but also, of course, within the Gateway area. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. There are a number of other Restoring Your Railway schemes that we still await decisions for. They've been submitted to the department, to the Restoring Your Railway programme, and I'm afraid we await decisions just as the promoters of those schemes do. So that includes Corsham, it includes Stonehouse Bristol Road, St Anne's Park, Langport and Somerton, all of which are new stations, and the Wareham Swanage reintroduction of passenger services as well. So we wait and see. Excuse me. The board may recall that we've set up a very successful model where we jointly develop our strategic studies, which give us sort of middle and long-term recommendations for passenger service development and freight service development, and then we have partnered in developing the outcomes of those. So taking from strategic recommendations into investable business cases, and we've used Western Gateway funding to do that, and working together to identify what are our priorities and how can we best get those into a position which a funder could buy effectively. And that process is still yielding good results. So at the moment, there are 3 bits of work that are well in hand and through Western Gateway funding. Those are the West of England line, in this sort of Wiltshire portion of that line, which is between Salisbury and Exeter. I'm looking at how we can double the frequency of services on that piece of railway. The Heart of Wessex line as well, which is that railway between Castle Carey and all the way down to Weymouth, which actually is a significant north-south route in Western Gateway, and it's right that we think of it in that way. And at Cheltenham as well, where some of the work we did in our Bristol-Birmingham study has identified how a number of benefits could be met by a bit of intervention and investment at Cheltenham, and that could include, for example, some of those north-south Western Gateway services that are identified in the Western Gateway Rail Strategy, which is a really critical document for us to refer back to. So that work is ongoing, and we look forward to kind of continuing that productive relationship. And then in terms of the studies themselves, the strategic studies setting out that vision, we have just published the Greater Bristol Strategic Study, which is on our website. There's a link to it in the note that I shared, and that takes the story forward about actually much larger area than just Bristol itself, what we think we are aiming towards in terms of passenger train service development, and gives us really the framework within which we can jointly cite investment cases to make improvements. We're about to start work, our Wessex colleagues, on a piece of strategic advice around the Salisbury area, where there's an opportunity in line with a major re-signalling that is scheduled, and that will dovetail with one of the key focuses for the Western strategic planning team in the 12 months ahead, a strategic piece of work looking at Wiltshire and trying to map out a rail improvement programme for Wiltshire, and that will be based around and pivot from the Devizes piece of work, the Devizes Gateway station scheme that I referred to, but recognising that for that station scheme to work, wider investment is required around the Westbury area, which is a key railway hub, and that investment could unlock lots of other opportunities as well that will be beneficial for the whole Gateway area. So there's a real opportunity there, working with Wiltshire Council to partner on that piece of work to make sure that we've got the best evidence that we can, and the best alignment with Western Gateway objectives and themes from the rail strategy as well, and put together an appealing and compelling case for investment that will meet many different outcomes and therefore have many different beneficiaries and potential funders. So we'll be picking that conversation up. In fact, we already started that with James in particular, but it'll be a real focus for us going into the new financial year. So that's a brief summary, hopefully brief enough of where we are as Network Rail, but I'm really happy to take any questions if there are any from the board.
Thank you very much, Matt. Brief but comprehensive, I think it's safe to say, and it really does show the amount of work that is going on within the STB area. I mean, obviously, as a BCP person, I prefer a little bit down south east rather than northwest, but it certainly seems from a regional point of view that we've got it right. And I'd particularly like to endorse what you're talking about the heart of Wessex being a significant north-south route, which can only bring benefit to the Western Gateway region economically. So thank you. Do you have any other questions, Steve?
Thanks, Matt. Apologies if it's somewhere in the papers. Any news on Westerly Junction pinch point?
Thanks, Steve. Good question. It's not in the paper notes. So briefest way to summarise this. So we've done 3 strategic studies around Bristol. All of them show that there's a very strong case for improved connectivity, and that will quickly run up against pinch points on the network. You mentioned Westerly Junction, which is where the north-south line between Bristol and Birmingham sort of crosses or leaves the east-west Great Western Main Line. So we have used some of our own funding to identify what we think a solution could look like. But it's fair to say this is in the realm of the big stuff in terms of railway infrastructure to make improvements to that junction at Westerly. We know that's going to be extremely expensive, and therefore we need to build the widest possible case of benefits that would flow from that, and that's part of some work that we are continuing from those studies on the Greater Bristol programme view of short, middle and long-term improvements. I think it's fair to say that in the current climate, Westerly is something I would see in the longer term because of affordability and the need to show a very clear benefit that a funder is willing to buy. So we've got a good understanding of what we think we'd like to do. We are now making sure that we're absolutely clear on what that would enable in terms of the benefits that would enable, but there will be a point around affordability that probably means that it's not in the first flush of plans that we think we can have some success with.
Thank you.
Thank you, Matt.
And Steve Pearce, please.
Thanks, Mike. Steve Pearce, representing Dan Norris. Matt, great paper. Thanks for that. It's unfortunately it's always going to elicit more questions. Any idea when we might see boots on the ground? 2 questions. One, any idea when we might see boots on the ground at Portishead? And secondly, have you got any indication about when we might get answers to the Renew Your Railway bids?
Yeah, thank you. Very good questions. I'll take them in reverse order. We are waiting as well, I'm afraid. So the department, I don't want to put David in. It's not David particularly, but on the RYR scheme, they are decisions that are held by the RYR programme team within the department. So I'm afraid I don't have a clear sense, but we can see from previous rounds it has been a slightly lengthy getting decisions out. So I'm afraid I don't have much useful guidance on that one. So specific schemes, though, we're very happy to keep talking about, keep engaging with, but I appreciate what we're often looking for is funding that might come through the RYR programme. Portishead, so you'll know that there's been really good progress on Portishead, including last sort of late autumn, early winter. The development consent order was approved, so all is now in train for the project to complete. The current anticipated date in 2026, so still some time away, but that will see. I don't actually know specifically boots on the ground, but I know the key works contractors are now being contracted, and that is the beginning of the pipeline that will see delivery. I'm very happy to take that away and provide and get a much more specific briefing and update to you, Steve, if that would be useful. But it's going as well as we could hope that it would go, given the history on that scheme now.
Lovely, thanks, Matt. And yes, any news, I'd be.
Yeah, no worries. I'll make sure that that gets to you, Steve.
Thanks, Matt.
Thanks,
Mike.
Yeah, just on Portishead, I think I've got some news for Councillor Steve Pearce actually. So, Steve, my understanding is that the full business case is being developed as we speak now, and in regards to Portishead, the idea is to start construction by the end of 2024. And I think in Matt's papers, Matt said it's hoping to get the services then up and running in 2026.
Thank you very much. I'll scribble that down immediately.
Thank you. Matt, as others are going out with local ones, if I may, in my role as BCP councillor, BCP representative, any news at all on Poole High Street level crossing? It's for other people's knowledge. It's I think it's the third most dangerous crossing in the country, and what that's meant is that there's a very strict limit on the number of trains that can pass through there. From a regional point of view, there's two potential schemes, if you want to call it, which are relevant to it. One is the potential for a Dorset Metro, which will go across BCP and Dorset council areas, to try to increase the east-west movement. But secondly, with Heart of Wessex coming along, it would allow a link across the south coast into Weymouth to meet up with that Heart of Wessex line. Anything that we can do to see some progress there?
Thanks very much for the question. Absolutely right. So highlighted as a key intervention in the Dorset study. But I'll be absolutely honest with you. Let me pick that up with Jamie Rockhill, my colleague in Wessex. I'm not cited on the latest progress, and we discussed before that actually the opportunity with level crossings really needs assent from authority and from the local authority. And I think that we could really do something in that space with this particular case. But I will pick it up and make sure that an update gets to you promptly, Mike, on that specific issue.
Much appreciated. Thank you. If there are no other questions, thank you ever so much, Matt. You're obviously welcome to remain on for the meeting. I don't think that we've got anything else which is particularly rail focused in this particular meeting, but you're very welcome. And again, our gratitude. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll stay on. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And last by no means least, Alice, would you like to give us an update from Gaffer? Would you like to go up here so that we can, the people on the screen can hear you a little bit better? Thank you.
Sure. Hi everybody. So just to introduce myself, I'm Alice Darley. I lead for National Highways in our regional network strategy for the south of the country, and therefore I'm the representative on these board meetings. I've put a paper in the pack for you, which I will run through a few of the headlines. But before I do that, I thought I'd just quickly give you a bit more of a verbal update on M4 to Dorset Coast strategic study, which wasn't in my paper. So I will cover that now. So just on that study, we are approaching completion of that work. And the team are having meetings with local councillors and MPs on the emerging conclusions and to discuss those and to finalise the recommendations that will be going up to ministers and DfT. That is due to go to ministers fairly shortly, so we've got a few more meetings to go, and then that will go up. And it will be for the ministers to determine when and in what form that report will be published. The study has considered all the different, or the key strategic road routes through the area, including those that are not currently strategic road network. And the analysis that we've looked at has looked at different issues, including current performance, future demands along those routes, potential for enhancement, and the environmental ambitions around the areas as well. And the analysis has identified several tricky locations along each of the different routes, and there is no route across the geography that's an easy win. So there are some quite big decisions to be made should the ministers decide to do so. We are considering all those different factors in developing our recommendations, including that technical feasibility of addressing those issues, the affordability, environmental challenges, and acceptability to stakeholders of the various options. So that's M4 to Dorset. I'll just quickly run through some of the headlines of the paper. On RIS 3, you'll be aware already, probably bored you to death with these in the past, the various publications that we are hoping to publish very soon. The initial report on the SRN to advise DFT on what our recommendations are for the shape of RIS 3. The Connecting the Country, our long-term strategic plan, and the 20 draft route strategies. Those are all still awaiting publication at the moment. We are in the very final stage of getting approval from government on that, and then we'll get a publication date that we can go ahead, and we are hopeful that that will be in March, but I can't yet confirm that. So when that gets published, or that bundle of documents gets published, we will be moving into the consultation phase. That's the FT's consultation on the initial report, which we are told will run for 8 weeks. So that's looking like March to May. So that is the window in which STB responses will be welcomed. But we're also obviously going to be continuing to work with STBs as we move towards the final shape of RIS 3. And National Highways is looking for feedback on the various documents that still remain ours to finalise. So that period will be slightly longer. A few scheme updates are in the paper. So the A417 missing link scheme, we've launched preliminary works on that this week. So that has started in terms of the sort of environmental works, the archaeology and surveys works to enable that. And then all that work is offline to start with, and the main construction will be starting this autumn. The M4, M5 interchange was mentioned earlier, and Cribs at M5 junction 18. That's safety works and then maintenance works. I will take away the question about communication, but I think linked to that is a question about how much impact that will actually have on the drivers and the capacity of the area. So I will double check all that to see what the issue is. Councillor Reid, I'll come back to you on that. A358, you may have noticed that there's been a delay to our DCO application on that one. I know it's slightly outside your area, but it's A303 corridor, therefore quite critical for you guys as well. That one was ready to be submitted, went up to DFT for approval for submission just before Christmas. We are working with DFT as they consider the appropriateness of the environmental mitigations for the scheme to make sure that's all appropriate before it goes through. So that has delayed things slightly, and it should be going up in the fairly near future, but I don't have those. And just the final thing to flag was the National Communications Campaign that launched again this week around safety around driving around HGVs, which is quite challenging for a lot of drivers. You may see some TV ads and things like that out there. It's going to be a big national campaign on that.
Fantastic, thank you very much. And may I also particularly thank you for the M4 to South Pierce study, which looks to me not just to be comprehensive, but incredibly well argued. I think the way that the different options are weighed up within it, the way that it's responded to the particularly environmental concerns, the one that's near to us, obviously the south part of the A350. But responded intelligently to those, identifying also where there are items which are not directly on those routes, but will be enablers for it, and to be able to take diverted traffic and increase traffic, and the interventions that might be involved. I think it was a very intelligent, well thought out report, and hopefully good things will come of it. So thank you for that. Steve Reid, I know you had.
I jumped the gun very slightly. Thank you, Alice, for answering that question. The other one I had, any news on M418A?
I think that's just all in the mix for the RIS 3 decision for DFT, so we won't hear anything on that.
So I've got to wait and see, have I?
Yeah, I think so. So we're expecting DFT to publish a draft, whereas I think in 2024, I think. So that's when we get to the real site of what they're thinking in terms of the investments for us.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. If there are no other questions for Alice, then oh no, we do have Councillor Brian Ray.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. I'm obviously very disappointed that I was excluded from the meeting yesterday, but from the bits I'm picking up, I am going to have great difficulty in supporting what is being reported. I shall look forward for the final detail, but in consultation with our local MPs, I think we may have a trouble on what's being proposed. So I would like to have the opportunity to sit down with National Highways and discuss this in a little bit more detail, because I need some persuading to give my support. Okay, the final decision won't be mine, but I'm pretty miffed that I was excluded from the meeting yesterday.
So Ray, I don't think, obviously this isn't the forum for that, but I was at the meeting yesterday and we were expecting you. So I don't know, there's obviously been some mix up in communication.
Yeah, I think Michael, I did email you, but didn't get a response. But I did actually, I was told that National Highways had said they didn't want portfolio holders there. They wanted purely the officers. So I backed down, and then I find the meeting went ahead. Let's take it outside of this meeting with National Highways, but I'm pretty grumpy over it.
Okay, thank you, Ray. I think we'll try and find out what happened there.
So double check, was that M4 Dorset?
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much, Alice. Right. To move on down the agenda, then we've got the next one is item 5, which is the work programme and financial update. We've actually got 4 very brief verbal updates, which will be coming on alternative fuels, which we looked at briefly last time, and was coming back. Cycling, which we, as a board, believe that there was a considerable amount of work to be done on that, but David, you're going to update us on it. You're also, David, going to update us on coach strategy, although not on the agenda. You're going to update us on freight strategy. Before I ask those to do so, Guido, do you have anything you'd like to say on the paper itself before we go to those immediate ones, or would you prefer to speak after them?
After them, fine.
Okay, thank you very much. In that case, James, would you like to say yours on alternative fuels, just for a very brief update, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair, and I'll introduce myself. I'm James White. I'm one of the technical leads for the Western Gateway STB. Hopefully the board will remember the presentation we had at the last meeting, and all the work that's been going on with the alternative fuels for freight. Quite a few issues were I think, very usefully raised at the meeting, and we commissioned Atkins to go away and do some extra work to support the strategy. There are quite similar comments also coming from the Peninsula Board as well. This is a joint piece of work we've been doing with the Peninsula. So Atkins have gone away and they're looking at the potential role of rail and ports and maritime and the agricultural side and the whole energy supply side as well. But I think the key piece of work they're doing now is looking again at that network map. And if you recall, there was a map showing potential locations for hydrogen and EV charging stations across the whole of the southwest, and it was flagged up by both this board and the Peninsula Board that there were gaps in the network. So Atkins have gone back to have another look at potential locations off the strategic road network and particular locations that will serve the more rural areas of our two geographies. So we're expecting that piece of work to be reporting back mid-March. And we'll be bringing the final report back to the board in due course.
Thank you very much indeed. And I think the one of the significant points that we brought up last time was how it had only considered the strategic road network really within that, and hopefully the report when it comes back will be looking wider than that. Yes. Okay, fantastic. Ray.
Yeah, thank you. As probably you're aware, hydrogen is probably one of my big things I'm looking at the moment. Can I request that we keep a conversation going with Southern Gas Network, who subject to government decision are well advanced on what they're going to be doing with hydrogen. I've had a number of meetings with them recently, because I believe that the heavy truck industry and the marine industry, the plant industry will all prefer to go hydrogen way rather than electric. So can we make sure we link in as many people's views as we possibly can, please.
Thank you, Ray. I think that point was also made by the board last time, and it still amuses me when reading through the minutes that both yourself and Steve Pearce referred to marine ones as having anchor tenants and anchor customers. But there we go. Thank you very much then, James. David, you've got two, one on cycling and one on coach. Would you like to start with cycling?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So just to introduce myself, I'm Dr. Dave Land. I'm a transport planner at Gloucestershire County Council and technical support for Western Gateway. So in terms of cycling, so following the last board meeting, programme team have discussed with SOG a way of making the cycling strategy work on a set of different priorities instead of kind of just like the population and propensity to cycle ones. So we developed between us the idea of a thematic sift, whereby rather than entirely redo the whole project, we'd reanalyze that 178 submitted routes, or was it 179? Anyway, to populate 4 or 5 different extra themes, which we'll then be able to map and prioritise. So what we talked about is these themes will be suitable for approaching different kinds of funding pots for future development. So they'll still have the support of Western Gateway, and we'll still be able to talk about them as prioritised routes, but they'll be under different kinds of headings and themes. So the ones we've talked about, and these are not yet set in stone, but that we're thrashing out with the consultants, are things like rural routes to access points, so rural access to jobs, services, communities, routes to different regions, so they're cross-boundary routes, national highways based routes. Clearly we need one on carbon reduction, that's an obvious kind of one to put in, some tourist friendly routes, that kind of thing. So I guess the caveat to this, before everyone gets carried away, well, I want this kind of theme, I want that kind of theme, is we need to be able to find data about those kinds of themes that we could easily accessible data, because we don't want to start having to recreate data and go out and find kind of primary data again. So we've had to reinstate the consultants that worked on the last piece. They've had a whole set of management restructuring, so that's obviously out of our control. So that we've got new project managers, as well as redoing the contract, blah, blah, boring stuff that I won't bang on about too much. I think this work should be done by the end of March. So I definitely in time for, well, I don't want to spoil the surprise, but some other ideas that Mike's got that we'll come on to later. So that's cycling. Do you want me to go straight on to coach, Mike, or do you want some time between the two?
I think just quickly on cycling, I think the main point last time is that we were as a board concerned that that it had been designed to make good routes better rather than to make poor routes acceptable. And with the sifting that you're doing, the resifting that you're doing, do you feel that that's being addressed?
Yeah, very much so. I think we've taken on board what you said last time, and I think this is well, I'm sure there are other ways of solving this, but this is the way that I think between us and SOG we seemed quite happy with a way of tackling that issue head on. That's great. Thank you very much. Yeah, Steve.
Firstly, thank you for acknowledging that poor routes being made better. That's a really important point. I noticed, and also very pleased to see that GSG3, the Woodland to Kingswood route, is in the paper. That's you have our support for that one as South Gloucestershire Council. That's very important because it stretches outside of the DRT boundary, which those of us who understand DRTs will know what I mean. Thank you.
Yeah,
thank you.
Cool.
Okay, yeah, if you could move on to coach then, please, David.
Yeah, no problem. So we had there was a final stakeholder workshop to discuss the findings of the strategy at the start of February. ACOM, our consultants, are completing edits to form the final coach strategy. I guess, don't take this personally, Alice, but the things we're really desperate for are the comments back from National Highways and from the Confederation of Passenger Transport. So we see this as critical feedback, and to be fair, both bodies in the workshop said they were going to feed back extra material, and that's really only the only thing that's holding us up, Chair. But we don't feel that we can. What I don't want to do is put forward a strategy that hasn't got feedback from those major stakeholders in, because I think then we're going to end up with kind of abortive work, or we're going to have to change stuff. So we really are very close. If we could get those feedback, the feedback from those two bodies, and I know CPT has been quite challenging to get hold of, but once we're there, then there'll be a draft report ready for everyone to look at, and we've also requested an executive summary because the report is really quite comprehensive. So I think what we've asked for is an executive summary that also is a standalone document as well. So it's not just like a one-pager summary. Actually, it's a standalone document as well. So it's not I didn't want to come to this meeting without people having had enough time to read the report, which is why it's not with you, because we wouldn't have done this 2 weeks ago, and we are still waiting for those responses. But other than that, we're there.
Thank you very much indeed. Alice,
I can respond to that partly in that we've only just received the copies of the comments on very recently. So I've got a high level response in training to you today. However, I wasn't aware of the data promise that has been made in the workshop you referenced, so I'll have to go and check that now.
Okay.
Sounds like a very good way forward for that. Thank you very much. And how about from the passenger side, David? Is there anything that anyone here can do to assist?
Does anyone know? I mean, if anyone's got any contacts at the CPT, I know I was speaking to James. We were speaking to James earlier, and there's been similar issues with some response to other work as well. So they have got form in this area, but I think the fact that in the workshop they said yes, we want you to have our feedback. We have been holding out for that.
Thank you. Ray?
Mike, as you're probably aware, I went and presented to the Transport Select Committee in London a couple of weeks ago, and they requested that I give them as much detail from the South West Gateway that we possibly can to link into the work that the Transport Select Committee are doing. So can we make sure we send as much information as we can? I think we've sent some, but anything else that comes up, can we make sure anything to do with public transport or whatever needs to go to them, because they're looking in depth at the rural position for passenger transport.
Thank you. We do obviously have some Cape strategy and others that are coming forward. So maybe we can make sure that we share them at the earliest possible opportunity. Yeah, thank you very much. Again, if anybody around here thinks of some way to hurry CPT up, and again, just one extra question on that though, David. In the absence of a full CPT response, is there anything else that we or yourself can seek as an alternative?
Well, I guess it's a quite a challenge, Mike, because I think they're a real consumer voice. So, you know, in terms of we want to look like we've engaged properly and we've got the right kind of stakeholders on board, we kind of undermine our own argument a little. So I think it's a question of nagging them, really. I don't know if anyone else really feels that role that they have. So that's the line from the consultants, certainly.
Thank you. Can we ask officers to sort of speak around Solvin, whoever else, to see whether we have anybody who might be able to give them a nudge in the right direction?
That would be great.
Thank you, David.
Thanks, Mike.
Freight strategy.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Jim Wilson. I'm Transport Policy, Team Leader at BCP Council and the Technical Lead for Freight for the STB. Just short update, there's been a lot of activity, as the board will be aware. The first ever South West Freight Strategy was adopted by the boards of Western Gateway and Peninsula Transport in May of last year. One of the main interventions that we're reporting on was to set up a South West Freight Forum. That has been delivered, and we've just had the third round of freight steering groups, and that includes 3 subgroups, one for aviation and maritime, one for roads, including haulage, and another for rail. These were all very well attended. Again, particularly strong contributions from the aviation sector, road haulage and the rail sector, and we noted a slight lack of participation from the port, so that's something that we need to push so we don't lose momentum. But again, very good interaction and very good information sharing forum and continued interest, which is very positive. There has been a lot of activity on a number of the interventions, but I'll just update the board on a few of the more ones that were more interested in the previous meeting and on when the strategy was adopted. First one was on load matching. just to highlight the importance of freight to 3 of the emerging STB objectives, one of which is economic efficiency, development, levelling up and decarbonisation. We've started working with a company called Haulage Exchange on a potential load matching trial for HGVs. That was viewed with a great deal of interest by the RHA. The idea is to encourage multiple hauliers to join an internet-based load matching service with a view to reducing unnecessary CO2 and reducing empty running. The strategy itself identified a huge amount of empty running, and this is disproportionately high in the southwest, so this offers levelling up benefits as well as decarbonisation and economic benefits. So really positive to see that interaction. Haulage Exchange are interested in participating with us. We put SME, HGV, sort of haulier businesses in touch with them, and in exchange for that, they're willing to offer us a sort of discount, and so that offers a really good news story. Moving on to rail freight, I want to emphasise the importance of rail freight within the strategy. There are 9 interventions related to rail freight and 2 specific ones related to rail freight sites. And just to highlight that even one freight train can take up to 50 HGVs off the road, and the southwest as a region does not move as much rail freight as compared to the national average. It's a real levelling up opportunity as well as the others. We have written to 13 of the southwest local authorities, including peninsula local authorities, and asked them for feedback on potential rail freight sites within their area to build on local knowledge, but also opportunities for reserving rail freight sites through local plans. So any local authority that's working on an emerging local plan, this is a particular opportunity to safeguard rail freight sites. And also we're looking for feedback from authorities on potential freight terminal sites. We have also written in the same letter on the rail freight side to all local authorities asking for information on bridge strikes. This is again a disproportionately big issue in the southwest, which I think Councillor Bride has previously highlighted. So hopefully we should get some good feedback on that and be able to develop our understanding of some of these issues that are impacting on the freight network in the southwest. And just last but not least, at the last meeting, I did highlight to the meeting, although without disclosing any details, that the M4 to Dorset Coast RIS 3 study is likely to report in the not too distant future. That study was unsurprisingly of particular interest to the freight sector, and in particular to the RH Road Haulage Association and their membership. That's all. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. Any questions for you? In that case, Guido, would you mind just giving us a quick update on the paper itself?
Sure, thanks, Chair. So that covered the key updates we had. All this.
Oh, I'm sorry, Ray. Sorry, I didn't see you in time.
Yeah, sorry, Chair. I think it's the right time to actually say to the officers, thanks for all the great work they are doing. Far too often, we end up with perhaps criticism being passed on some of the paperwork, but they do an absolute sterling job. So I think it's time that we congratulated them on the work we do. I've worked with Ewan on a number of things, and he produces some great work. So I just want to pass on my thanks for the work they're doing on areas that I'm looking after. Thank you, Mike.
That's very kind. I'm sure that's echoed. We were particularly complimentary in the past on both the freight and the rail strategies. So very much appreciate it. Thank you. Guido.
Thank you. Yes, so as I was saying, that those updates cover some of the key work streams we've been making progress in the last few months. It's worth mentioning we're also making progress on EV charging, led by Dorset, and on the rail strategy phase 2 alongside Network Rail. In terms of the actual numbers and financial update, so spend is in line to where we're at with the last report. It is worth mentioning here that there are some areas of underspend, so there are some areas of larger underspend. There are some cases where the spend was carried out with different sorts of funding, some cases where there was a slight underspend. And it's also worth noting at this point that the budgets and underspend we've got here are available, and we're using them until the end of the financial year. From the next financial year onwards, we will move on to the new funding for the new year, in line with the business plan that we will cover in the next week.
Thank you very much indeed. I think we've got 3 recommendations on this paper as it stands at the moment, but I think actually that we're only able to take through one of them, the first one, because the other 2 items 2 and recommendations 2 and 3 on paper A are to be covered later in this agenda. So if I can just propose that we do the note the contents of the programme update report. Are we all content with that? Yeah, thank you. And as the items, the recommendations 2 and 3 will not take now because they're updated later on in the agenda. Okay. Thank you very much, everyone, on that one. We'll move now on to the next one item on the agenda, which is the strategic transport plan update. And we know that we've had some significant delays in putting this together for various different reasons over the last months. And at the last meeting, we agreed that we would go forward with a two-part approach, where we would be going to engagement on the issues and options paper, which is very broadly identifying what are the sort of issues and options that people would like to look at, and also giving key stakeholders and the public as a whole the opportunity to comment on those. James, you put that together. Can we talk about the paper itself first of all, and the contents of it, and how that's then going to fit in with the a recommended strategy that will come through at a later stage, and then we can talk about timings after that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a couple of slides. If Chris is able to load them up, I think that will help to visualise what we're doing. As Mike said, this is the first of a 2-stage process for producing our strategic transport plan. We need to produce a strategic transport plan. It is going to be the guiding document for everything that we do in terms of transport. And the idea is to have this issues and options paper, which is attached in draft form in Appendix 1 to the report, to take this out to early engagement with our key stakeholders. And this was previously agreed by the board that we would focus this particular part of the engagement on our key stakeholders. And there's a list attached as Appendix 2 to the report. But this is largely drawn from organisations and groups which have been involved in the Western Gateway Business and Transport Forum. It's not an exclusive list, but it's a good list in terms of representing all sorts of different transport organisations and bodies across the whole of the Western Gateway area, and indeed national organisations as well. So the issues and options paper itself, the intention was to try and keep this as short and as engaging as possible, and to keep its length down, to make it concise, to make it something that will be interesting and as I say, engaging to read, to promote as many good responses as possible. And it focuses around three key issues, and that's that need to achieve net zero. These all reflect National Department for Transport issues and objectives as well. So achieving net zero, reducing carbon emissions, protecting the environment, enabling economic growth. Clearly, also, transport has a very major role to play in enabling growth, and then levelling up the region as well. And that's where things like that north-south connectivity and the importance of the rail links all come into that, and indeed the M4 Dorset coast study as well. So we've got these 3 main key issues, and then we've looked at potentially 6 different options for addressing these issues. Good, thank you. We've got you ahead of me there. So there's 6 potential options. I should say that these are not exclusive options. It's likely it's going to need a combination of one or more, or probably all of them potentially. And in very broad terms, the 6 options are grouped around headings for improving the road network for all users, managing the demand for travel, enhancing bus and coach services, encouraging active travel, rail improvements for passengers and freight, and promoting alternative fuels. hopefully, there's a lot of detail beneath each of these options, but hopefully that captures a fairly wide range of potential transport options for addressing those three key issues. And throughout the options paper, we will have questions around, well, have we identified the right key issues as a starting point? Is there anything missing? What priority would our key stakeholders rank these issues? And when it comes to the options, similar questions. Have we identified the right range of options? Again, are there things missing within those lists? What would be their priorities for taking forward those options? And of course, it's an open engagement. So any other views, suggestions, and ideas will be very, very, very welcome. If I just touch on timescales, we're intending to go out with the issues and options paper. So next month, we're almost into March. Run it for a 4-week period, or potentially go to 6 weeks. Then bring the results from the issues and options engagement back to this board for our June meeting. And those issues and options responses, they are going to be key to helping to steer and to draft the long-term strategic transport plan, which is the next stage in the process. So we will use that to help steer how the draft strategic transport plan will look, and then we will bring that strategic transport plan back to the board for approval to go out to full public consultation with not just our key stakeholders, but everyone else, the wider public as well. That consultation is likely to be June, July into summer later on this year, with the aim to then, following that full consultation, to bring back the revised strategic transport plan to its board in the autumn for final adoption. So I'll pause there, Chair, for the answers before going into the recommendations.
Thank you very much. Actually, if I could just ask one quick question and one point, if I may. I'm used to planning options and planning policy papers, which is where I think the whole issues and options name came from. But the problem with the word options is it does sort of make people think that it's got to be A or B or C, rather than how much of A and how much of B and how much of C and such like. Is there any way that we could use another word other than options, or is that pretty much prescribed?
It's a good question, Chair. I think like you, priorities. We can consider it. Yeah, I think like you, Chair, I approach this from traditional planning perspective, that we have issues and we have options to look at it. Yeah, we'll have a think about whether we can
themes or something. I don't know.
So the version BCP, LTP, which we haven't discussed in any detail, but we were planning on calling it the issues and opportunities paper.
Okay.
We received a draft from our consultants, and that's what they called it, rather so that it doesn't suggest that it's either or options, it's just issues and opportunities. But obviously, it's systematic, really.
I think that would be better. The trouble with priorities is you also do a criteria based, but
opportunities need more.
Yes, but I think that would be advisable to do.
I'd be keen either on opportunities if it fits in there, or even themes when it comes down to the 6. And actually, just while talking about the 6, it's a very minor drafting change, but I think could be relevant. The options, themes, opportunities, whatever we could call them, are listed in the appendix as 1 to 6. And I just wonder whether that's a little bit inflammatory, particularly when the first one is around road network. And yet it's only much later that we come down to active travel and we come down to rail improvements, etc. So I just wonder whether there's any way, instead of giving them numbers, which sort of infers a natural ranking, whether road network could be RN and demand management could be DM or something, and we could just present it in a slightly different way just to show that this is a genuine open paper, an open request, rather than any predetermined ideas about how the ranking should take place.
Would you be
Comfortable with that?
a simple answer? If you put this bullet points, if you put the wrong button.
Yeah, I think the problem that we've got is that it then goes on to analyse each of the issues, regional issues, and has to show which of those themes, those opportunities. So they either need a number or they need an identifier.
Yeah, it wasn't our intention to make it look as though it's priorities.
And it
So
certainly isn't. And I think we all understand that here. But I just wonder when it goes out. If I was somebody who didn't believe that road building should be going on, and I saw number one in road building, effectively, I would be a little bit miffed going straight into it rather than wanting to approach it in the way that I think we should be, which is saying these are all things that we might be looking at, and we wish to discuss how we would prioritise each one and rank them against each other without any predetermination. Are members of the content with that approach? Yeah.
I'm happy. Yes.
Thank you. Ray?
Yeah, on a slightly different point, Chair, is it possible for the board members to see the consultation document before it goes out? Very often, consultation documents are local government speak, and we need to make sure if this is going for public consultation, then the public can understand what we're trying to achieve. So could we get sight of it before it's issued?
I think that is what we've got here in Appendix 1, Ray.
Okay.
So pages 5 to 16 are exactly that.
Unfortunately, I'm trying to work on a screen, so apologies.
Yeah, the draft paper is attached here, and it makes up most of this paper C. So that's where we're drawing the 6 from. So it's not the slides that you've just seen in front of you. I think we are relatively comfortable with that. Can I then turn to the timings on that? Because we are considerably behind for various reasons we've discussed at previous meetings. The getting to an adopted strategic transport plan, and we are very much behind other STBs, although they are obviously formed quite a long time before we were. We do now, even if it's been a little bit extended, we are running up against some hard deadlines. We are hopefully going to be getting a bit more guidance on the LTP for structures, etc., from DFT, but it shouldn't really now affect us from where we are. There is the question that has been brought up before about whether we should be looking to have an engagement period over the course of a pre-election period or further. And I feel though that the way that we have put this together and the way that it's gone over the last several months, that there is no reason really to delay for a 2-month period. I don't believe that there is anything within this paper and the paper that will go out, the engagement, which would cause any offence, any bias, or anything else. It is a paper that goes out with the invitation to participants to say where their priorities are, and those priorities then those results will not come back and will not become open until after the elections have taken place. Manda.
Hello. First of all, many apologies for being late. I was having a nightmare with the technical way of joining. My concern, I think, Mike, is, and I hear exactly what you're saying, but from the 20th of March, we as members who are having the elections won't be able to go out and talk or promote or engage on this. It will all be done via officers. And I don't think that that's going to necessarily, not being mean about officers at all, but without the member engagement, I think we could run the risk of doing this early and not well, or delaying for a couple of months and doing it better. I may be a lone voice on this, but I am really nervous that it will just be something that will just slide on by and won't really get the attention that it deserves, because everyone A, be in the pre-election period, or B, be concentrating on their own election.
Okay, thank you. John.
Chair, I support your view. I don't think we can afford to delay on this. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I think the point well made about members being involved, but they will have the opportunity to be involved, but just not to promote, or not to promote involving themselves. So I think that all the local authorities would be able to do so with impunity as it goes round. As Don says, we have for various reasons had to delay this, and it is putting us in a poor position as a subnational transport body. Elections take place around our 9 local authorities at some stage every year, and to have something as important as this work delayed, basically that we can only do that sort of work for 10 months out of 12 each year, I think really doesn't work very well. I'm also very conscious that there is nothing within this that should be controversial. There may be some controversy following the results we get from this, which will obviously not come to us until probably June at the earliest. There may certainly be when it comes to the second stage, which will be in the autumn. But the last thing that we want to do is to be pushing that forward to the spring, and then find we may even have the same problem again. Amanda, do you want to come back?
Yes, please, Chair, thank you. I do appreciate that I may be a lone voice on this, but one of the issues we've had within Bath and North East Somerset has been about engagement, and the only way we've got proper engagement is we've got members who have gone out and promoted something which they won't be doing at this stage. So I don't think it would be useful for the document if by the time whoever it is who's doing this comes back in June to look at it and finds that one of the authorities has had practically no response whatsoever, where the others have had lots. It will be quite unbalanced, I think. So take on board what you're saying about, other authorities do elections, third, etc. But we are all out once every 4 years, and will not be spending any time, or would not be allowed to be spending any time, promoting this, which, as you rightly say, is a really important document.
Thank you. We actually, my own local authority is all out every 4 years, and it's all out this year. But I don't feel that same problem in my local authority. There will be things that I can appear on myself. There'll be things that only officers will be able to appear on. But I don't see that it's going to the name on it is really going to be the thing that determines whether people and organisations. But I'd like to hear what other people say. That David,
the consultation is by nature an apolitical thing. It's just seeking public or whoever wants to make a contribution their input. I don't see it as something that has anything to do with campaigning or any political aspect to it. As you said, and the danger is actually it works quite nicely in that we'll be in a position where we will be making decisions in a non-herder kind of timeline, and the danger is we'd end up pushing those decisions into a period that would be impacted by those kind of considerations. And personally, my authority is not up for election this round, but I would be absolutely happy for officers to be leading in terms of the communication and engaging, seeking using the facilities of the council to promote people to enter into engagement with that topic.
Thank you very much.
I would agree, and my officers promote this stuff anyway, and occasionally I'm asked to participate. So as far as I'm concerned, we just get on with it. Get the conversation underway.
Thank you. I think we are coming to a majority view on this, and unless any of the officers or board members who haven't spoken have a different view, I think we are, at least collectively, happy to be going ahead with option 2, which is to approve engagement starting in March 23 and extending into the pre-election period. So that would be that we approve the issues and options paper set out in Appendix 1 for engagement with key stakeholders, subject to recommendation becomes final in a second. Approving engagement starting in March 23 and extended into the pre-election period. Recommendation 4, approving the list of key stakeholders that's set out in Appendix 2, although obviously if any member or officer would like to suggest any others that haven't been included, please do so, whether it's before the consultation starts or during it, and to delegate producing the final version of the issues and options paper, the programme team in consultation with the chair and vice chair, which would involve making only small changes to the extent that we've been talking about and grammatical corrections, etc. Are we all happy? In fact, do we need to vote on this? Because I think if matter.
Sorry.
Sorry.
No, I don't want to interfere in terms of the timing of it, but I do have a suggestion in terms of content, which I thought was worth raising now.
Please, we'll pause on the recommendations until we thank you.
It was just that you've got your 6 opportunities at school, Nick. There was one key one which I felt was missing, and I just wondered if you wanted to consider that at all, which is that I think there's one missing around multimodal journeys. So you've got obviously focus on roads, you've got focus on rails, you've got focus on active travel. I wondered if you want something specifically, an opportunity around enabling people to change mode during the journey, or freight to change mode during the journey, which could lead to different interventions and suggestions.
Right. I have to say that I think that could be a very useful intervention, but James, you're the author of the report. What do you think?
I suppose by default you could argue that it's contained within some of those options already, but we could bring it out more that it is part of those options, or have it as a sort of standalone, a 7th option, as it were. But I totally agree. We need to make more of that multimodal.
I'm disinclined to make things up on the hoof, but actually I think that the point is that it's not just while it's not separated from each of those, this is about where the impetus should be. And actually, one of the things that we as a board have been particularly pushing when we look at the rail strategy, and freight strategy, etc., is how the different modes of transport do interlink. So actually, I think it probably is a decent.
I agree. I think Alice makes a really good point. I think it does actually warrant a line of its own, even if the detail refers to the other parts.
Right. In that case, if we do that, and it sounds as though we are generally comfortable with doing so, I think, although we can leave the recommendation as it is, that it should be that final improvement should come to myself and David as chair and vice chair, I think I would prefer that that an additional version can go to all members of this board, so that they can feed in to yourself, James, and myself and David before that final sign-off is given. Is that happy with that, Caroline?
Yeah, can I just clarify, because I'm quite relaxed about introducing the additional priority. I'm just a bit concerned about the amount of text and an input that might be required in terms of fleshing that out, as indeed all the others are fleshed out. And so I'm not quite sure how that process is appropriately going to be signed off, or the resulting content is going to be appropriately signed off, because that can't just be a matter for chair and vice chair. But did I just mishear, because the sound quality isn't great, so I might have misheard what your final suggestion was as part of that.
My final, I think it will indeed add an extra paragraph to the report, and my suggestion was that before the vice chair and I sign it off, that it should go to all booked members so that they can feed in their either approval or recommendations or comments before we sign it off.
In advance. Okay, that's fine. That was just a lack of clarity on the sound. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair, because we're only talking about an additional paragraph or two, could I suggest that you actually put a time frame? I'm getting responses back from us. I always appreciate, you know, a time frame for these sort of things.
Absolutely. I think we could hopefully, again, we'll need to speak offline, James. My thought is that we should be able to get that done within the first few days, and that we would then be able to get it out to all board members again with a turnaround of 3 or 4 days from that additional paragraph.
Yes, that should be fine, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Steve, on that one. Thank you. So with that amendment, can I then move those recommendations 1, 3, 4, and 5, please? David, are you happy to second that? And do we, Ray?
I find myself in a very difficult position now because of an announcement that was made in the Echo last Thursday, Mike. Are you going to be in a position to sign this off?
I will be in a position to sign this off ahead of March. I think the announcement that was made for board members who don't know is that I will not be seeking re-election in May after 22 years. It's decided. I've decided to. My wife, who's also been involved for 16 years as a councillor, have decided we'd like a bit of us time. So, but yes, we'll be in a position to do so in March, obviously after May, and when it comes back to the board, I will unfortunately not be here to see it. So yes, we will be in a position to do that then. So,
thank you, Michael.
Thank you. So we have those proposed and seconded. Is there a need to go to a vote on it, or can we just take that as with assent? Not seeing any others, I think after that discussion we can consider that to those recommendations to be approved by assent. Thank you very much for everyone on that one. If we can now move then to the business plan, which is paper D, and that's, I think, you again, James.
It is. Thank you, Chair. Slides moved on. Thank you, Tricia. We produced a business plan. It's attached as an appendix to paper D. It's based around the guidance that the Department for Transport issued to all the STBs for producing their business plans for 23, 24, 24, 25. This slide's just got a very brief summary of what's actually in it. We try to make it as engaging as possible. I'm not to produce a huge, long document in terms of what we're planning to do. We're doing a lot, but it doesn't need to go into immense detail as such. So there's a bit of background explanation as to what the Western Gateway is. We then look back at what's been achieved during 2022-23, particularly around the freight, adopting the rules, strategy, alternative fuels, and the emerging coaches and cycling work. There's a section on what's new for 23-24, and this comes out of the guidance from the Department for Transport around the greater role that STBs can play to provide business case support to all the local authorities. The Centre of Excellence, which we heard about a bit earlier on under the Department for Transport update.
Regional Centre
of Excellence, sorry, yes. Regional Centre of Excellence. Supporting our local authorities' local transport plans. Going back to what David said, the guidance is due out any time now. So that's a very key role for the STB to play. And something that's called the Common Analytical Framework, which is coming out of the Transport for the North STB. Transport for the North has been developing this framework, which will provide essentially a central database for all STBs to use and a common approach to developing business case. There's potentially lots of economies of scale here and value for money. And the Department for Transport has awarded Transport for the North funding to roll out their framework for all the other STBs to use. And I've actually got the first meeting on that tomorrow, but still early days. There's a whole section about the importance of working with our partners, clearly Network Rail and National Highways, as well as nationally with the other STBs and of course the local authorities. There's a new section on regional centres of excellence, I'll get that right this time, around how the STBs have a much greater role to play in supporting the local authorities with preparing their business cases and helping to facilitate and deliver schemes. And then the key part of the business plan is a series of two tables, which sets out proposed expenditure for 23-24 and 24-25. There's a summary table which I'll flash up in a moment. There's also a table with more detail behind it, and also showing how it meets the Department for Transport's objectives. As part of the guidance, we do need to produce a strategic investment plan, which will set out clear regional priorities for the Western Gateway area. I think we're not at that stage yet. This is the sorts of priorities that we're going to have are going to come out of the strategic transport plan. So this is going to be something we will need to develop later on in the year, but it needs to be acknowledged in the business plan. And the section on resources, which needs to be kept under review, we will need to develop a monitoring and evaluation plan to go with the business plan as well. So Christian, just put the next slide up, please. That's probably rather small for people to read in the room, but this sets out the proposed programme for the next 2 years and puts budget figures against each of those work areas. The list of work programmes, this is drawn from our current programme of schemes. There's a couple of new lines in there around the business case support, which I mentioned, and the Centre of Excellence. But this is really all about continuing the work that we've been doing up to this point, continuing development of those. Staff costs are in there as well, and a small amount for contingencies too. I should flag up that we have slightly more Department for Transport funding for this year, and taken with the £20,000 contributions from all 9 authorities, we have a total budget just under £1 million for this year, and it rises to close to £1.1 million for 24-25. I think, Chair, shall I pause there for any questions before we go to the recommendations?
Thank you very much. Just before we take questions, you will see, members, that as we have in the past, there is a pretty wide spread of spend, but each line of this is on an item of work that we're already undertaking, already committed to do. I think it is, we should at this point say that although this is the budget, it's only the overall line, the bottom line, which is obviously fixed in stone. And so if there are any environments from one to another during the course of the year, then that is quite possible. And indeed, as we go through to 24-25, we'll see, particularly with the additional funding streams come from DFT or from other sources, and they're identified within the report where they're likely to come from, we may decide, or the board may decide, either to reduce spending on that line because we have an alternative form of funding, or indeed to increase it if there's a possibility of a multiplier effect when we take the money that's coming from outside as well as that we have introduced. So I think we should be accepting that the figures for 24-25 certainly are outlined, and even to some extent those for 23-24 are. But I think that this is a very good place to be with all the knowledge that we have at the moment. So that was my thoughts on it. Do we have any other questions for James or comments? Steve?
James, you don't have a row in there for reserve, but what Mikey just said, I think there's a fluid reserve going across the whole theme, if I've heard it correctly.
Yeah, we have a small amount for contingency,
Yeah.
but it is a fairly small amount. But I think yes, it will flow through everything that we do, and that needs to be flexible and adapt as we go through the rest of the year.
Right, thank you.
And then one thing that should maybe have said earlier is that you'll notice the line for staffing has a significant increase from 23-24 to 24-25, and that's because we expect to be employing our lead director officer at some stage during 23-24, and the full cost of that will be included within 24-25. Are there any other questions or comments that we need to come up with? Otherwise, James, are you happy that we move? Do you have more to say, or are you happy that we move the recommendation? I am happy to move the recommendation.
I think I've said enough, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. So in that case, what we're being asked to do is to approve the business plan for 23-24 up to 24-25 set out in Appendix 1, the submission to the Department of Transport, and also to delegate using the final public-facing version of the business plan to the programme team in consultation with the Chair and Vice Chair. And once again, my assurances will go to all board members that there would be no significant changes. These would be drafting changes more than anything else. Yeah, in that case, I'll move the recommendations. Are we happy to accept that? Yeah. Thank you very much, and thank you again for putting this all together as you have. Very, very good indeed. So the last substantive item on the agenda is the forward decision plan, which I'm going to come to Guido in a moment. But there's one additional proposal that I'd like to put to the board, which does influence the timing for these decision plans, and that is that our current work plan imagines that the next meeting of this board will only be in June. Now we've got over the next literally 3 or 4 weeks, we have some significant items coming forward. One of which we have referred to earlier, which is that the guidance we expect from the Department of Transport, the long-awaited guidance on the transport plans, is going to be due over the next 4 weeks, and will be very significant to us. We also have 2 strategies which have been delayed: the coach strategy and the cycle strategy, which you have heard David Glynos suggest that we may be well ahead, if you like, or up the top potentially within the country, so that we could be potentially using ourselves as a regional centre of excellence for that work that we are doing. It would seem to be unfortunate to me that we had to leave it until for another 4 months until we brought forward those strategies, which we had hoped to have at this meeting, in one case for the meeting previously, and also not to be able to discuss the guidance that's coming through from DFT. So I would like to propose that we have a further meeting in April for members of this board. I think realistically it will probably have to be online, and also we may wish to try to slim it down so that we're looking only at those items which are more urgent. I would also think that it's reasonable that if there is anything coming through which is controversial, then at that meeting I would hope that board members would agree with me that it should be that they should be deferred until after the elections, when there will be different people on this board, because I won't be here for a start, but to give those people the opportunity to do that themselves at that point. So I would like to propose that we have an extra meeting in April, Amanda?
I've literally just received the stuff that we've been sent through by our democratic services about what we can and can't do after the 20th of March. And I don't think I would be allowed to in any way attend such a meeting and represent the council. So I don't know if other people's democratic services interpret things slightly differently, but I can't see how we could have a meeting during the pre-election period.
Do you have anyone who can answer that from here? I don't believe it's the case in our local authority. Again, it would sort of interrupt the work of multi-authority organisations, of which we are one.
And I understand where you're coming from, Mike, but we have been told phenomenally firmly the officers carry on the work during the 6-week period. As members, we have no status, no nothing. We cannot go to any meeting where where it looks like we're representing the authority, because we no longer are.
Right. Okay. I'm not quite sure how we can get around this, but I would suggest that we need to hear from other authorities on that. I've got a thought, but Louise, can I bring you in now?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to introduce myself, I'm Louise McBride. I'm the Head of Transport Strategy at the Combined Authority. I was just going to suggest that as the Combined Authority is the accountable body, we could perhaps take that question away and seek advice from our Director of Law in specifics in relation to that meeting being held. I know I've sought his advice in relation to other issues affecting the pre-election period, but not that one specifically. And we could come back to you with his advice.
Thank you very much, Louise. That was actually almost exactly what I was going to suggest. In that case, can I propose that we put that meeting into the diary? However, we wait for the advice from the Secretariat as to whether that meeting, whether all board members, in the Secretariat's opinion, can or cannot attend, and if all members, if it is not possible for all members to attend during the and I mean any one of them that could not attend during that pre-election period, that the meeting should be an informal one only that cannot take any decisions. So we'll still have the meeting, and depending on what WECA tell us, it will either be a formal or an informal meeting. Is that okay with everyone? Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so Guido, do you have some more that you'd like to talk to us about on the paper B then? I understand, sorry, that a couple of those dates are going to be a little bit in the air for you as far as decisions are concerned. But would you like to
Yes, actually, so I think most of you covered it. It is at the next meeting, and then the key points to define are the approval of the revised cycling strategy, the approval of the coach strategy, and the approval of the revised alternative fuels strategy. Those are the decisions to be made.
Okay, and I think really, so looking at the recommendations themselves, they are, I think, just to note the contents of the board. Yes, note the contents of the board decision plan, advise the programme team of any issues or additional briefings required. I think we are content given that discussion that's taking place. We know where we are on those strategies. We know when they're likely to be ready, and we know when we're likely to be receiving the information from DOT on the LTVs. Yeah. Thank you very much. So hopefully we're happy to have that one. We now just move on to any other business which has been previously advised. I've got one very brief one, but before that, Julian, would you like to, because we had an email from someone who's attended a number of people, several of these meetings in his capacity. Jim Stewart, would you like to speak to that?
So I was just make board members aware that we've received an email from Jim Stewart, who's the Chief Executive of Park Commissioners, and he's been our chair for Transport and Business Forum for a number of years since we started actually. And I just wanted to make members aware if they weren't already, and potentially to thank Jim in terms of providing services for all the efforts as well.
Thank you very much. Yes, Jim, as he will be known to members from these meetings, he's also been known locally to us in Dorset. Ray and I have come across him with many others, including his role in the local enterprise partnership, and the Transport Forum, Connected Dorset that we have, and various others. A very fine contributor to the public sector as well as the private sector, and so I hope that board members will be happy to report our thanks to him. Are there any other AOBs? Otherwise, I shall just bring up mine, which has been slightly prefaced, which is just to say thank you to the board myself. This will be the last meeting, potentially the last formal meeting that I will be at. It will either be, but it's certainly the last one that we have in person. I very much enjoyed it. I would like to thank all the fellow board members and officers. I think we've been able to do this right the way across the political divide. That we have found a huge amount of common ground, and I believe that the Western Gateway has an outstanding role to play as we go forward, both on the regional scheme and also on the national scheme. This is about bringing local authorities together. It's about making sure that we in this part of the South West have a voice at the national level. And I think that we've made a pretty good start at that over the last few years. And whether it's my last formal meeting or not, I will wish everyone well as we go forward with it. So that was all I have to say. Ray.
Yeah, I think it's only fair that we place on record our thanks to you, Mike, for the work you've done, for the reorganisation that you've done, which brought in the lead members. I thoroughly enjoyed taking part in that. My personal thanks to you for the help you've given me in my role within Dorset Council. Sorry, buddy, I'm going to miss you. It was a shock when I found out. So I'll get even with you one day, I promise you.
Thank you very much indeed, Drew. Thank you. Oh, and thank you also, David, for that. Really appreciate it. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you again. And by the pure coincidence, we actually seem to manage to end just on time. So with that, I will close the meeting. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Mike.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.